In this session, we are going to be filleting a flatfish. This is a great technique for you to master. What it means is that you'll be able to buy fish straight from the fishmonger at home, fillet it, and then cook it straight away. The perfect way to enjoy it. You've got a few different options. You can either fillet alongside me, you can watch the video and then have a go at filleting yourself, or if you prefer, you can just use some fillets that you've already bought. Our one ingredient for this session, we have a lemon sole here. This is weighing approximately 700 to 800 grams. Filleting of a flatfish is such a great skill that you can start to add to your repertoire. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through it step by step for you. But I just want to talk a little bit about First of all, it is really important that when you're filleting a fish, you've got a nice flexible knife. So a fish filleting knife that's got a really good bend, and you can see how that is bending there, and that will allow us to be able to remove that fillet really nice and cleanly. On a flatfish, which we've got here, which we've got a lemon sole, on here you have 2 fillets on the upper side, just here, and then we also have 2 fillets on the other side. So 4 fillets in total that we are going to be removing from here as well. So when the fish starts off, a flatfish, a couple of weeks, it will be swimming as a normal fish. So it will be swimming this way, and then what will happen is it will end up turning. Now it will have been white on both sides. It then will turn like this, and then this skin here will then become a little bit darker. You can see this dark colour on here and quite mottled. These swim along the bottom of the seabed. This is to blend with the base of the sea as well. And what happens then is this eye, and you can see this eye will just grow around and end up being just to the left. So we've got the 2 eyes just here, but you can see how they're just slightly to the left-hand side. And this indicates a sinistral flatfish. Before you get started, what I would do is just have a plate ready. This can be used for putting the fillets onto once you have removed them. Also next to me, I have some salt. This is going to be really useful for the removal of the skin of the fish. And then I would make sure that your board that you're using is as a portrait, and underneath you have either some damp paper or like a non-slip mat or something that's just going to stop your board moving around too much as you go to fillet. The last thing we need to do just before we get started is there'll be quite a lot of natural slime on the fish. This is a great sign, but we do need to just remove that because this will mean that our knife might slip a little bit as we're filleting this. So I'm just going to remove all of that slime away, making sure that it's nice and dry. And then we're ready now to start the filleting process. Important for your knife. First of all, we talked about the fact it's a fish filleting knife. It should also be really nice and sharp, so make sure your knife is sharp. Otherwise, you will find not remove the fillets easily. And the other thing as well that we want to do is to make sure that we're using the whole length of the knife, not just the tip here. So you're actually using that length right there. Now, if you have a little look at your fish that you've got in front of you, you should notice that there's a line down the center. Now, it won't be exactly in the center. It might be a little bit off, but that's an indication as to where the backbone is lying, or the spine, should I say, is lying along there. So the first thing we want to do is to follow that line. So just with your knife, nice and flat, cut through the skin. You may find the skin a little bit tough. You can see I'm just using the length of the knife to do this. We're going to then make one cut down at the base here. That will indicate where our fillet is going to finish. Just make sure you're not wasting any fish. So we're going to come right down to here. And then having done that, we need to just do a little indication as to where our fillet is going to lie and where it's going to kind of start. So here, this fillet on this side is much bigger than the fillet that we've got on this side. How do we know where the flesh starts and where the head kind of begins? The best thing to do is just up by the head, give it a little bit of a tap, and then you'll hear it go much quieter, and you know then that flesh is starting right up there. So I'm just going to angle my knife. Now what we need to then make sure is that these 2 lines, the one I've just created up behind the head and the one down the middle, are then joined together. We don't need to do a line at all here. This is where the guts were, and that actually gives us that natural line on that side of where this fillet is going to begin. So now we've done all our markers, we can start the filleting process. As we've talked about, it's important to now be using the flexibility of this knife as we go to fillet. What we want to do is to be angling our knife just into here, and we want to use the whole length of the knife. Now, very differently, it's about actually using the sharpness of the knife and a stroking motion in order to remove this fillet. So I'm just angling that down so it's right against the bones and using that flexibility against the flesh as well, so that we're really kind of pushing against those bones. I'm just going to do it nice and slowly so that you can see. And what you should find is as you start to remove this, you'll start to almost see those bones underneath, leaving no flesh at all. As you push your knife, you'll hear that kind of rasping noise against the bones, and that's what you really want to be listening for as you're doing this. So you can see I'm just stroking with that knife, allowing the knife to do the work. I'm hardly putting much pressure on at all. It's just a nice gentle motion. That fillet is now coming away quite nicely. And we can just keep working our way across. Now, if you have a little look down, just down here, what we started to enter is the part that's called the frill. So we know that we're coming to the end of our fillet. And what we want to now do is just to cut that away. So just gently again, still angling your knife. And then you should, if the fish, especially if the fish is nice and fresh, you should then just be able to pull that last bit away, and that will just pull the frill away from the frame. Now what we have just left in front of us, you can see on here, is this frame where we haven't got any flesh left on there at all. So that's our first fillet removed, and we're ready now to do the next one. Removed our left-hand fillet just here, and having the head away from me, I'm now actually going to remove this fillet on this side, we're going to turn it around. So I'm going to have the head now towards me. Now we talked about earlier on where the cut, that first cut we did, which is where the spine is, and the spine's almost shaped like a kind of triangular shape. So I've come one side of it just here, and what we now need to do is to get the other side of it, making sure that I'm kind of pushing my knife in at an angle as we go to remove this fillet here. So observe where the spine is to begin with, just so that you can see it and you can feel it. And then exactly the same thing, making sure that you're running that knife nice and gently, allowing the knife to do the work as we talked about. Just going to make a little cut just there, just to make sure that I've got an opening. Now it is a little bit more difficult on this side sometimes because the head may get in the way. It will be a smaller fillet, and what you may notice when you get to about here is that you have got some row. So don't worry too much, just come over the top of where the row is, find where the frill is again. You can see that this fillet's a little bit smaller. And then just coming away where that frill and cutting that away. And as we talked about, that last bit can just be pulled off from there. So there we've got our other fillet. We're going to lay that onto the plate. And then we can now tackle the other side to remove the other two fillets. So we're going to turn the fish over and we'll make a start on these. Now we're ready to remove the other two fillets from the underside. So what you need to remember with this is basically you're doing kind of mirror image. So for this, our larger fillet is going to be the one on the right-hand side this time, and then our smaller fillet will be on the left-hand side. We need to follow exactly the same rules that we did. So I can also see that line down the middle here, which is where the spine is. So I'm just going to follow that line first of all. One of the things just to remember is that because you don't have the support of the other two fillets, it can feel a little bit less secure as you're doing this. So just hold the fish as you need to and support it as you're going. So we've done our one down the middle where the spine is, the one at the end. Just make sure all the lines are joining up. And then we're going to do one just here. That's where the guts were, so we can feel that little empty gap just there. So we're just going to come just above that and make a little cut. The skin is a little bit tougher on this other side. So again, if you need to resharpen your knife, then do. And then lastly, remembering head, and then where it's a little bit quieter. So we're just going to now make a cut just behind here. And I can see that all my lines are joined up. So we're ready now to repeat the next action, which is going to be the removal of this left-hand fillet. So for this fillet here, this is going to be the smaller fillet. They are definitely, the yield that you get from this side is definitely a little bit smaller. If you find when you're doing this that your knife is not kind of doing the work as efficiently as it was, do just quickly sharpen it, because that will really help. You can still hear that nice rasping noise of the knife against the frame. I'm just going to continue just nice and gently around this area because it's a little bit delicate. We've come across the row again on the other side. And then we're down to our frill now. So I'm just going to use the knife just to remove. And then we can just pull up. If that's not happening, then just pop your knife in and just keep cutting down towards the frill. And then that last fillet can come away. Just going to pop that onto the plate. And then lastly, we're going to now turn the fish, remembering head towards us, to remove that left-hand fillet. Now, one of the things I would say with this is that around this area, rather than doing the full length as we're coming along, you may find you just need to be a little bit more intricate. The head gets in the way a little bit, and you just need to be a bit more detailed when you're coming into this area, because it is quite difficult just as you're removing round by this thicker part of the fillet. So we're going to now start to remove this one. What we need to do now, and hopefully you can see it already, is to identify where that spine is. Now, I can see that it's just here, a little bit under the fillet. So I'm just going to, with the knife, just try and get over the top of that, just so it makes it a little bit easier to remove the fillet. So you can see now where that kind of triangular spine that we talked about. So what we're going to do is, now that I'm happy I'm over there, I can continue to remove this next one. One of the things to remember when you're removing these is that you're always aiming for a really nice kind of natural shape of the fillets. And hopefully by the lines that you've cut, it should give you quite a nice natural shape. Now this is the bit where I was saying you might need to just do a little bit more detailed kind of filleting. I'm just going to, with my knife, come right underneath here, just to remove that top part. Don't worry, you can see just there, I've just gone a little bit underneath the bones. So I'm just going to get my knife on top there. Don't worry too much if you do take any bone with you, because we can always remove it later. And now that I'm over that part, I can now continue with the long stroking motion all the way along the length. You can see that when you get to this last fillet, the fish moves around quite a lot, just because you've got no support at all left on that frame. And then we can just pull that last one away. Place that onto our plate as our fourth fillet. And then what you should see, and hopefully on your fish frame, is not too much flesh left on here, especially around by the spine area. You should also notice that you've removed as maximum amount of flesh up from the head end as well, and it should be the same on the other side, making sure that you've got that really kind of clear, visible framework that we can see on there. You can see now that I have just given my board a little bit of a clean, got rid of any of the slime or anything else that was on there, or any bits of flesh. So we've got a nice clean board now to start skinning. What we want to do is just to take a little bit of salt out of our salt pot, just so we don't keep dipping our fingers into there. I'm just going to put a little bit of salt just onto the side. And then I'm going to take the first fillet and we're going to place that onto the edge of the board. So what we want to do is just to be removing this fillet along here, and you can just see as I run my finger along how it's kind of identifying where that fillet is. The frill will remain on the skin. What you need to do is to just have a little bit of a grip. So just to take a small amount of salt, not too much. We're going to, just down at the base here, I'm going to come probably from about a couple of up, just so that I can hold on to that fillet with my fingers. I'm just going to put the knife in very gently through the flesh, and as soon as I can, I'm going to start to angle that down nice and flat. So I've got a nice grip onto that piece of fish just by using the salt. There's a tiny, tiny little bit of wastage there, but it's allowed me to get my knife in, and I'm now going to really kind of give some tension to that skin as I push across with my knife. Now I'm keeping the knife nice and flat as I go. I'm going to now just lift that up so that you can see. We've removed our flesh from the skin. I'm now going to move my hand up, so I'm giving a little bit more tension again, and then we're just going to run our knife along. Now you may find you want to have your knife flat. Other times people may find that rather than being completely flat, they need to just have it a little bit of an angle. It's whatever works for you and whatever you find by being able to remove that flesh nice and cleanly from the skin. So just keep that tension, keep moving your hand up the fish as you're going. Another technique that sometimes people might do is almost to have the knife angled like that and to kind of push across as well at that angle. That also does work. It is a way that you'll find, and then you'll get used to that way and you'll be able to keep to that technique. So once we've removed our skin, that goes to one side. The frill just here, we can remove away. And then that is our first fillet, which has been skinned. We've got this, which is known as the bone side, which was what was against the bone. And then we've got this, which is known as the skin side, where you can see this kind of herringbone effect on here. And that's what was against the skin. So you should be able to then identify bone side and skin side. Place that back onto your plate, and then you can repeat with a couple more fillets. Do the second fillet, and you can see on the second fillet here, this is where we've got some of the roe. So what we want to do with the roe is it should be quite nicely contained. You should be able to just lift that and pull that away and remove that off. Now, we talked about bringing the fillet to the side of the board, and the reason for being like this and in this particular position is because we want to get our knife really nice and flat to the board. And so we can do that if we bring that fish to the edge. My hand then is just resting off the board and I can get that angle that I'm wanting to get. If I try to do it here, I wouldn't be able to probably bend down as much because my hand would keep hitting that board. So that's why we bring the fillet just to the edge. Do a little bit more salt on my fingers. Just keep that tension, keep moving your hand up the fish as you're going. Another technique that sometimes people might do is almost to have the knife angled like that and to kind of push across as well at that angle. That also does work. It is a way that you'll find, and then you'll get used to that way and you'll be able to keep to that technique. Here we have our 4 fish fillets. So we've got the 2 from the upper side and then the 2 from the bottom. These now can be just placed onto the plate. covered with some, and then just pop them into the fridge. But I would suggest using them within 24 hours. You have learned a really good new skill, the filleting of flatfish. Keep practicing it more. You will find that your confidence will build in this great skill.